Welcome to another episode of Transcontinental Overload. I'm Stephanie, your host, with an episode for parents. It's an episode for the parents of teenagers, mainly, and for those parents who are about to enter the teenage years of parenthood. Yes, it is all from an angle of expat life, which means a multitude of extra layers, but the advice and insights that my guest gives in this episode are not only valuable to global families, but to all families. I have to say I wish I had met her when my kids were younger, but oh, am I glad to have had this chat with her now. Let's welcome Dr. Laura Anderson. Laura is a child and family psychologist who has worked with kids, teens, and families for 25 years. She was raised on the East Coast of the US, but her work and studies have taken her further to the West Coast, and she says until she couldn't get any further and landed in Hawaii. She says that in many ways, Hawaii isn't really like living in the US, and that's what she likes about it. Over the last 30 years, she has studied and lived outside the US, in Australia, Sri Lanka, and South Africa, the country where her adopted son is from, and Ghana, where they both lived for a while. When I was first introduced to Laura, she lived on the US West Coast in Oakland, and just as the coronavirus hit the US in March, she packed her bags literally overnight and fled back to Hawaii with her son. Laura is extremely passionate about what she does, and her own experience has shaped her career so much, and she says that she feels like she's learning new things every single day. Her expertise is in working with global and nomadic families, adoptive families, and families raising LGBTQ plus children and teens, as well as treating anxiety and depression in children and adolescents. She has spent much of her career working on school campuses and is quite familiar with both home and school environments for kids and teens. And if you feel like you need help, and let's face it, who doesn't at the moment, then you can get in touch with her. I'll provide all the contact information you need in the show notes. So let's hear Laura's story. Welcome, Laura. I am so excited to have you here today.
Happy to be here today as well.
I'm excited, because we get to hear your own story as someone who has lived and worked in more than one country. But also we will hear your professional perspective and how your experience has fed your profession, your professional development, and your decisions to do what you're doing. So I'm excited on so many levels. And of course, speaking to a fellow parent of a teen.
Preteen, but
Okay.
often feels like we're in the throes of it already. But preteen, I've worked with lots of teens, but my own particular child is preteen, so I know good news and bad news is I know it's coming.
Yeah, we'll definitely get to that. But before we dive into the professional side of things and what it is you're doing and what you're specializing in, let's hear a little bit about your background. And so you're in Hawaii right now, and it made me smile when you sent your little description of yourself, and you said you were raised on the East Coast of the US, and then you kind of kept going west until you couldn't go any further, and you ended up in Hawaii. And yes, because you like that Hawaii is not really the US. So
I do. I mean, I know, especially for folks who are really in the in the outposts that expat life can bring, sometimes there's a raised eyebrow at calling Hawaii not really the States, but it is distinctly culturally different from the mainland. There's no doubt about it. There's a learning curve. There are obvious fouls to commit. There are very nuanced differences, which in some ways are trickier because you don't think you've just landed in another world, right? In a way. So, but yeah, I do appreciate the fact that there's a cultural learning to happen here every day. I enjoy that part of it. Yeah.
So you were born on the East Coast.
Maine, about right as
Oh wow,
northeast
yeah.
as as northeast as I can get.
And then what happened? Just give us a little life in a nutshell.
Sure. Small town Maine.
Yeah.
The little country store gave me a graduation present when I graduated. One day my brother had a little fender bender, and everybody at the gas station and store knew before I did and told me on my way home. That kind of a setting, and stayed in New England for college. Kind of did the New England liberal arts thing, and then actually I moved to South Africa. I had the enormous life-changing experience of being in South Africa and teaching in the townships of Johannesburg during Mandela's election period.
Oh,
Um,
amazing.
yeah, and it changed my life. It impacted my
Yeah.
family formation later. So that was like straight out of small town New England and the bubble of liberal arts education to Johannesburg in a time of great upheaval. And then back to the States, moved into the Midwest where I did my graduate school training. I did some studying abroad, and then I did my residency in Hawaii. Thought I would stay in Hawaii for a year, and then went in and out of Hawaii with other travel things, and did a stint in Sri Lanka doing relief work following the tsunami. And then back to Hawaii, then more time in Southern Africa, 2 years in the international school community and expat world in Ghana, and then a few years in Oakland, and then back to Hawaii. And there were family and professional reasons for each of those moves, which we may end up talking about.
I spent a summer in South Africa in Durban in 95, so just after the election. And so I know, and I came from a very kind of liberal, well-to-do little area in Germany, and I had no idea what to expect. And when I asked people, I said, "Oh, I'm here." My boyfriend at the time was doing an internship, and I just thought I'll hang out with him for the summer and just go to the beach and ride my bike around. And people were like, "No, you can't do that." So yeah, that was a very very interesting experience.
It's such a fascinating. I mean, again, it was life-changing. There is so much beauty there, and I think it's one of the greatest modern miracles of our time that it didn't disintegrate around that whole major transition. And yeah, people were patient with my learning, and yeah, no, it was life-changing. I've been back all the time since. I have my family was formed through connections there. There are lots of ways that it shaped my work and my life too. So yeah.
Do you feel like it was for you, it's kind of clear that you would be always going to try and live in other places and experience new cultures and new things?
Totally. And I think especially because I wasn't, or it was an interesting contrast. A lot of people have asked me like, how did you go from the country store, in a tiny town? My parents were not wanderers. My bedroom is still my bedroom from 1970. Like nothing has changed in the place that I left. And yeah, started with some school trips in high school, but then and I studied abroad for a bit in college, but that was Australia. Awesome, amazing experience.
Still abroad.
It is.
Hey, yeah.
I was just gonna say, amazing experience.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of it sort of just let up. And I think that for me, I just think so. And some places sort of just, I don't know, it sounds hokey, but let's speak to you a little bit. Some places are more comfortable a jump, or more energizing. So not, if they're not comfortable, they're like there's something that draws you to stay and learn, and you appreciate, or it's more, the differences resonate with you, or I don't know how to explain exactly why. For me at the time, social justice was a piece of it, but I also don't, it's not like I've been this warrior for that's a funny line too, in terms of thinking about.
But also that kind of thing, I think, has a huge impact when you are at a particular age. I think if you're a social justice warrior, and you are into trying to improve this world, then it's never going to leave you. But I feel there's this specific, because I see it with my 18-year-old daughter now. I mean, she's on fire in a way that it just changes, I think. And although it's like early 20s, it's such a huge part of the format years. Yeah.
No, I was definitely really hard to be around for most people at that time. And maybe they would say I'm still hard to be around, but I was really clear in what they all needed to be doing differently. I mean, it definitely was, And I hope that I've harnessed some of that passion, and I still do my part in contributing to a world that I'd like to live in, and fighting against parts of the world that I don't, parts of the way the world works that don't feel good to everybody. But there is something distinct about I was a literal sponge, and it was all so new and fascinating. I mean, it was lonely too, though. I will say it was lonely at times. I think I lived in the so-called colored or mixed race township, so there was not at that time not another white person for miles and miles and miles, and not another American around at the time. The influx of Americans came after Mandela's election, so it was also a really interesting look at race and power and what it felt. As a white American, I didn't have to give a lot of consideration to my race when and yet in South, every time, like multiple times a day, I would leave an exchange thinking, now, did that just go the way it, like all of a sudden I had this really pronounced awareness that my race was shaping how the whole world was interacting with me. So that was also separate from, South Africa, super definitive in the work that I've carried forward.
Imagine, but also so absolutely essential. And I feel sometimes I wish more people had the opportunity at an earlier age to experience themselves from like an outsider's perspective. I wish everyone had to spend a year outside of their country, after school, go and live somewhere else, just to get that perspective and to feel what it's like. And especially, I mean, for us as white Northern European and Northern Americans, I had that experience when I was in South Africa too. That was like the first time I really had to think about what it means to be white, and all the stuff that comes with it. So eye-opening, absolutely. So did you feel and you said you were working in an international school environment too, or was that later?
That was later. And when I did my younger stuff, it was interesting. It was more I was independent. I lived with a friend's family from college, so sort of independently negotiated. So then many years later, gosh, almost 18 years later, I ended up in Western Africa, where I made an intentional decision to move there. I have a Black son, actually from Southern Africa, adopted, and was actively seeking. We had been in Hawaii, which is beautiful in many ways for its racial diversity. And, I was actively seeking sort of what I would describe at the time as like other culturally dislocated families in terms of like.
That's a good description.
Right?
Yeah.
I was like, okay, we are two cultures. We are two, like where can I go to a place where there's talk about identity, where relationships are complex and moving, and people have a broader view of how identity is formed and multiple influences in the identity that gets formed. And so I actively sought out community in that regard, and was actively also seeking places in which he would be in the majority and I would be in the minority, moving around in the world. And that's where a job popped up. Ghana's, an amazing place. And so my son was 5, and we headed off there for him to start kindergarten
That's
in
exciting.
the school that I was working at.
Yeah. So how long were you there for?
We did 2 years. It's interesting. I had initially hoped that it would be a bit longer, but for a variety of reasons, both in terms of some, kind of professional things and the fit, but also just in other scope of identity kinds of things in our family, there's a little bit of gender expansivity. So my son is not necessarily a rough and tumble boy.
Mm-hmm.
And there were parts of the community existence around that were kind of intensive.
In
And
Ghana?
yeah, and within, it's actually really interesting. Not just in the host culture, right? Where people will sort of say to me, well, there are certain parts of the world that
Mm.
through faith or through tradition or through any number of
More
reasons
conservative.
are going to be more
Mm.
conservative naturally. And yet it was also within, I think my experience was that there are elements of the expat community which also have, even within the Westerners who are in the African expat communities, where there are still kind of firmly rooted gender roles within those communities, or Western or other folks who are the business communities in these places. So people who
Mm-hmm.
are not Ghanaian, who shape the expat and community, there still are there's some commitment to gender roles and some common
Yeah,
patterns.
that's a really interesting observation. I've never really thought about it that way. I guess because, well, I've never experienced that kind of expat living where it's quite a close-knit
Yeah.
expat international school community, kind of a bubble. So I can imagine that could feel somewhat limiting too, because you're in an environment with structures that so Western structures that seem familiar or comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and then you don't really necessarily mix that much with the host culture.
No.
And then very often, some families go only for a year or two, and then they know that they're going to be moving on, and it's so yeah, I haven't had
Typically.
that experience.
And it was really interesting, I think, from the racial standpoint too, right? In
Mhm.
terms of, and I want to preface this not to say feelings or to say faith.
Mm.
Overall, it was an amazing experience. People there were incredibly welcoming, both in the broader Ghanaian, just smiles and welcoming and curious and kind, and like our experience was positive. In the expat world, we made lasting friendships with people we're in touch with, that were associated with the school and in the broader community as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it was complicated. It was, in terms of the racial. I was walking around, people would call me madam, and like there's definitely still a colonial. I mean, like
Mm-hmm.
we definitely still have. You can't subtract race from your family's existence anywhere in the world. You just can't. And we are very visibly a differently raced family. We are just, you can't, every once in a while people would try to stretch and find out whether or
Mm-hmm.
not, he was biologically my child, but the assumption was a lot otherwise. And it was pretty intensive. And then when my son would speak, he didn't sound local. So local kids in the store would stare at him. I mean, like literally people were really fascinated with this idea that we were together and that he didn't sound like anybody they knew. And they were trying to figure out what our relationship was. We got a range of reactions from like police checkpoint officers, begging me to take them to. There was definitely a layers, and my kid would just be like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy." And I could do an entire segment on police and and the numbers of times I was pulled over because I didn't have dip plates on my car because I worked for the international school. So I have a lot of police stories, which was interesting for a 5-year-old in the back seat who doesn't really understand that when they approach the window and announce that you are going to be arrested, that they don't actually mean you're going to be arrested. Or the times I drove away from them when he's like, "Mom, you just ran from the police." I'm like, well,
that's some interesting memories.
And I'm like, it's okay. okay to run from police when they're trying to bribe you? You know, like I'm having this conversation with my kids, like, okay, Dr. Anderson, what did you just teach your child?
You don't think about those things. Your intention was to experience that other culture and give your son that sense of, it's not, the US isn't the only country in the world, and there are other cultures and with different races. It might have been a very different experience had your son been older, if he'd been like 15.
Yeah, he definitely struggled to make sense of it, and it's all been good. I mean, and it really, and I think really what you can't subtract the way race plays out through different parts of history in different communities and different relationship to race and age and and so I think there's a lot in the expat community that people love to think that we are progressive, that we're ahead of the curve when it comes to understanding cultural differences and racial differences. And there are many folks in the community who historically kind of pride themselves on saying sort of like, hey, we don't see race as an issue here. Like, come on, we work all around the world and we make this work. And yet my kid at 5 was like, why are all the assistant teachers Black?
Yeah.
And the head teachers are all whites. Why is that, Mom? I'm like,
well, they have been, just even like recently, there have been publications and books tackling that, and I've listened to podcasts about that subject and the inherent, let's call it racism in the system. And I've asked myself so many times whether it would have been better for my children to have gone to international school. My children were born in the UK, and then we moved to the US. But they were raised with speaking German and English. And sometimes I felt like by throwing them into the US public schools, they missed out on a lot of internationally minded people. And they had to put up with a lot of bias and people like staring at them and the way they spoke. They had a funny British accent, and then they turned around and then they spoke German. And for a lot of kids, that's a lot to take in. And so very often I've thought, oh, maybe it would have been better for them to be surrounded by international kids. But then, like you said, it's a pros and cons situation. But also I went into the whole thing without any I didn't read any books. And now I have them. I'm just reading this one. This is a new one.
Oh yeah.
And it looks amazing. Raising Global Teens. And it's a little bit like stable door, horse bolted. My kids are 18 and 14, and I wish I had read more when they were younger, and probably would have avoided a hell of a lot of situations and mistakes. But
I think it also speaks, I think that speaks in terms of what we're talking about too. Like, there's nothing quite, before I was a parent, and I worked many years as a child and family psychologist before I was a parent. And I was never a know-it-all. I was always humble and like, hey, listen, you're the expert on your family. I can just tell you the theory. Like, we have to work together. I knew that there were layers I couldn't understand, not as a parent, but I didn't really understand how much I couldn't understand until I was actually a parent. In terms of like, the amount of pressure we put on ourselves to do the right thing and be in the right place with our kids is intense. And I think it plays out a lot of what I see in parenting globally nomadic teens, the guilt that parents feel for any evidence that suggests they aren't in the absolute right place at the right time because their child is facing a hardship, or there's something they don't understand, or they're being othered or outed or bullied, that suddenly, because expats tend to have mobility and resources and decision making as part of what's available to them to a certain degree. I mean, I know people can get tracked into career things and not have ultimate flexibility in the moment, but generally we sort of, as a group of people, think, well, I could do this or that, or I have the flexibility to set myself up. If I make the next 3 decisions right, we can play it so that we end up there. We're always planning like 5 years ahead of where we are. And I think what comes with that privilege is a lot of pressure. to make
Yes.
sure that you've done that chessboarding correctly, that you're supposed to know how to anticipate your 11-year-old,
Hmm.
15-year-old needs
Hmm.
and plan accordingly ahead of time. And if things aren't going in a smooth or protected or clearly beneficial way, then the guilt means that a lot of parenting of globally nomadic teens, children too, but teens, is reactive and is guilt driven and is
Yes.
yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And I mean, to your point, also the planning and kind of thinking ahead of where your child is now, and thinking, well, if we do this now, and then in 2 years, then they would be ready for that school, and then it's high school, so let's move then. And but then you maybe have more than one child, and then the other one is at a completely different point, also different personality. And then
Yeah.
what you thought was right or kind of worked for number one does not work for number two, and all those things. So it's, I mean, is there a good age to move kids? I mean, it's because I really don't think there is. On the whole, there's no silver bullet kind of
No.
situation, is there?
No, I mean, you'll find there are some, depending on which educational system
Mm.
you're in, there are natural transition years,
Hmm.
right? Like in the US or American International, like your freshman year, you want to make sure they have at least 2 years. So there are some more natural transitions when it comes to joining the flow of school. But even then, I think you don't have to read every book, but if you're holding with you the things that kind of work
Hmm.
well when you're transitioning kids, then you can set those up around them no matter
Hmm.
what age they are. So it's more, I think, to me, I think about it's the recipe, it's the ingredients you put in the transition recipe more than it is like when you're
Hmm.
deciding to do it or not. I think there are pros and cons, and you will want to work with whatever your receiving entity, culture, school, business is on, like, you know, here are the things my kids are going to need, or what your kids are going to need to help with that transition into a new social space or new community. Often it's the losses of sports teams or theater roles or that kind of thing, like how to ease the pain of losing that social connectedness and the definition through groups to
Yeah.
move to a place where they're starting. So to me, it's more about the other ingredients in the recipe being wrapped around a child regardless.
So what are those kind of the basic ingredients that you just have to make sure that you have, and that your children need to know that they're there?
Yeah. A couple of key ones that come to mind, and this is an important one, and I see lots of parents struggle with this. Child input comes up a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so do we ask, are we getting there? And I think
Yeah.
it's really clear. What I can say is that broadly, if children have the sense that they have no input,
Mm-hmm.
that's anxiety provoking.
Mm-hmm.
If they have the sense that they're responsible somehow for a decision that has been made or will be made, that's very anxiety provoking.
Yeah.
And your teens will push for that. Your teens will push to know the nitty gritty. Your teens will scream at you for not letting them tell you what to do, or for not listening to them. Like, they will push to be included at a peer level, right? They will trick you into thinking they're equipped to handle the nuances of decision.
Oh my God, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. Yeah.
And the sweet spot, as is often, is somewhere in the middle, where your young children,
Yeah.
and or teens understand, we are taking input, we are listening to you, we are considering what we know is important to you in terms of activities, connectedness, timing for school. We want to hear everything that feels important to you, and the buck stops with us. Like, at the end of the day, we are going to also be weighing in factors for your siblings, for careers in the home, for aging grandparents somewhere. Like, we have a we are integrating, we are weaving together many factors, and you are a very central one, and we want as much input as we can get from you, but ultimately, we're going to have to make the call based on all these other factors that we don't need to
because
worry.
Of course, if you ask your child, do you want to move, they're probably 99% of the time they'll say no. Although I have this cute story with our two, and they were 4. Was she 4? Even she was 3 when we decided to move. She was 3 and her sister was 7, and we didn't do we just said, hey, we have really exciting news, we're moving to America. And the older one was like, that's not exciting news, that's terrible, and left and slammed the door, and her little sister just disappeared after her, and we thought she was going to go and, I don't know, try and find out what was going on. No, she came back down the stairs and had packed a little bag, and she was like, when are we going?
Yes.
And I was sat at the kitchen table in tears, in floods of tears, because I was like, oh my God, this is the worst thing we're doing to them. And then little one comes and says, hey, I'm ready.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah. And so you have the intersection of developmental stage and a kid's temperament. Some children just are more flexible. Some children are more flexible, and sometimes that has to do with temperament. Sometimes it has to do with anxiety. Anxious kids, worried kids tend to be a little bit more clenchy. They get rigid, they lock in, they want sameness. I don't even mean that like diagnostically. I just mean like there's a rigidity piece. There's a temperament piece. Some kids are really kind of go with the flow, pick their head up and look around. Oh, here we are. And other kids just need a lot more preparation. So I think that's the other thing. When I think about the recipe, one would be like, hey, yes, you matter. Yes, we hear you. Tell me. And okay, we got it. We're crunching it into our machine over here, and it's on us. The end result is on us. The second piece would be the preparedness a little bit. Like, and as your teens get older, you're going to get more eye rolls about it, in terms of like, especially if they've done this before, like, really, Mom, this is our 5th move, and you want to sit down and show me a coffee shop near the school, like, whatever, right? And like, well, you still want to try. I mean, you still want to think about preparing them for what's to come. And your more anxious, rigid, resistant kids need reassurance. Look, the house is going to look familiar. We know how to do this. We'll get set up your stuff first. We'll keep your world will change in many ways. And yet the day-to-day, we are working hard to keep familiar for you as much as possible, right? Start small.
And it's
bigger.
I found the more enthusiastic you are, or kind of trying to sell them something, the more they go, yeah, nice try, Mom. But it's so difficult to find that balance of, it's gonna be good, but you don't want to be completely negating all their worries. And
I think that's the biggest thing I see too. Honestly, one of the other big things is that parents go into cheerleader mode.
Yeah.
And they,
I've been there.
Yeah. And they, out of their own worries, their need to sound like they believe this is going to be the greatest thing ever.
Overcompensating your own kind of misgivings and anxiety.
And so they quickly, like, you brush over the loss. Like, I would say it's probably the number one thing that keeps me in business, genuinely, as a child and family psychologist, is families' struggles with sitting with crummy feelings, like hard feelings, loss, fear, guilt, grief. They're a part of life, and yet somehow we know that cognitively and rationally, but when it comes to our children actually experiencing them, we will hurl ourselves in front of buses to stop them from having these feelings that we rationally know they need practice having. Right? So we go into this mode where we're like, it's going to be great, and they have a fabulous band at the school, and so-and-so's kid was there 2 years ago, and the volleyball team killed it, like, and what it does, and what you're going to get with adolescents in particular, is that when they feel, there's something about adolescent identity that is very much who I am is who you are not, right? Like
Yes,
and
I have two of them.
who I
Yeah.
am not is who you are.
Yes.
So if you
Yeah.
are cheerful, excited, peppy patty about this upcoming thing, they are going to dig in heels and be like, that sucks, or that is, you know what, you're so whatever. And it's almost like the identity formation becomes a little bit of a resistance dance. And so if you are rigid in your celebration, you may find you are met with equal rigidity in the hesitation. And so the reality is, as a parent, there's the sweet spot in the middle again of, I'm kind of worried too. Like, I don't know what to expect. I'm learning what I can. I'm sad I'm leaving my, friends here. I don't know what it will be like to be in this setting. So I notice some days I'm nervous. Other days I think this is going to be great. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm hoping there'll be things there you're like, but quite frankly, I can't promise anything, and we're all in this together.
Yeah, because you don't, I mean, you want to kind of show them that you are worried and you are sad too, but you don't want to be that all the time either, right? And because I found that, I mean, that's when it's really, when they see that your mom's really upset, they hate that.
Yeah. No, and there's layers too, right? Because some expats are moving of their own volition. Other expats just got an assignment that was the bottom on their list.
Or dad really wants this, but mom doesn't, and then there's tension, and it's all those
kids know that. Kids know that. And so yes, again, the fine line is, it's real to name when you're having hesitations. The problem comes when you're thinking your child is going to help you handle that. So you're like doing your work with your girlfriends, with your therapist, with your coach, with whoever, so that you have your kick the dirt, grit your teeth, cry and moan. And then you go to your kids and say, this is probably going to be a mixed bag, because guess what? Moving's a mixed bag. And I can't make any promises, except I promise that we're in this together. Like, that's the promise I can make, is that we're going to figure this out together. But especially with adolescents, there's a need to not be headed in the same direction. Like, it's finding their way.
And then they know exactly which buttons to push to. And that's if they want a certain reaction, they know how to get it. And so it's because it all sounds so good on paper and makes so much sense to think, yes, I'm gonna, I'm not gonna be too happy, but I'm also gonna be realistic. And you have all these ideas, and then they push the buttons, and then
they say something mean, right, about your marriage, or about
it's a real. So yes, moving teens is a whole other level of stress. But then, not moving teens sometimes is as well. So I always look at
at least you get changed. You change the fights.
I look at friends who haven't ever moved, or not at teenage age, and the kids are like, oh, I hate it here, I want to. And that's the other thing, because you kind of sometimes, and again, that depends on the child and their temperament and everything, and sometimes a move can be an amazing opportunity too for someone to come out of their shell.
If they have been in a cohort. I worked in schools for 18 years. There is no doubt that there are some cohorts that are just a tough draw, and that we would sit in schools, and I worked in the same schools for many, and I was like, what was in the water in 1993? This is a group that is really tough, right? And honestly, sometimes you can get lined up in a social group that doesn't bring out the best in your kids, or that there's been harm done, and a fresh start is not necessarily, a bad thing. And to your point, I think, again, we keep telling ourselves there's a right way to do this. And it's more, I think, being able to kind of surrender to, there are multiple paths with different potholes and different glorious lookouts, right? Like, each path has lookouts, potholes.
Yes, and we just need to buckle up for the potholes, because there are plenty.
Well, the other thing that I always think is helpful when I talk to parents of teens, this is funny. We did some surveys of high school students in the international schools that I've worked in one consultation work, and we're like, listen, what do you want your parents to know? Like, your parents are trying to be like, oh my gosh, what do you want your parents to know? And over and over and over and over again, there were two main sentiments. Number one was, just feed me, like literally. There was this huge
money and food.
See, there was this, and even more than money, and maybe it's because these were resource groups, so money was sort of a thing that they didn't even have to ask for. I mean, it was like understood that kids had spending money, but like food came up. I cannot tell you the frequency with which, like, I just want food that I like. I want to be fed regularly. I want it to taste good. That feels nurturing to me. My parents have a role in that, right? Like in their minds, they're like, my parents still have a role in keeping me fed and feeding me well, as a way to stay connected. Like, genuinely, what these parents of teens are saying is, how do I stay connected to my kid? I don't recognize them anymore. Some of them, I mean, I don't mean to make it sound overly dramatic. I mean, people, there are definitely ways that parenting adolescents isn't torture. I don't want to make it sound like it's all conflict and disconnect and like all that. But it's a part of the individuation. Their job is to separate from us, and they're supposed to be defining themselves separate from us. And so food is connection, I think, is a really interesting one to be able to share and still feel like you're able to nurture and create space and recognize the needs that kids have. Because the other main message that came across from the young people was, go away until I need you, and then be there exactly the way I need you.
Hello. Yes. This is so true. And that's the hard thing, really. And like you said, it's not all drama and not all torturous, but the intensity of how it is when it is and how absolutely devastating it can be to be the parent of a teenager. And that's something I think before you have children, you just don't realize the intensity of the bad moments is horrendous. So I like the food and giving them space. It's
space. And honestly, with the piece about, like, to understand that when they're separating from you, that it isn't a holistic rejection of you, that they come back. And that the foundational work that you've done in the early years, the family values you've imparted, the things they've watched you do, I mean, both good and bad, but mostly good, right? They've internalized that. The values are there. They're pushing against them as a way to define their own identities. And you have to trust that it is not a rejection, because then you will be available. So if you give them space, but you're kind of not helicoptering, but you're floating, and you're looking for the cues that they're struggling, and you're looking for the opportunities, the car rides to talk to them, the weekends away, the hike, the coffee shop chat, the like, hey, I've been hearing from your cousins or the neighbors' kids that, like, some kids at the high school have been into XYZ. What do you think about that? Great ways to have conversations with teenagers about what other people are saying or hearing. Not what they're doing, not what their closest friends are doing, but like, did you see that in the news? Or did you, like, do you think that's happening where you are? Like, what do you think? If you were in charge of that, how would you think your way out of that one? Like, there are spaces and ways to have those conversations that aren't about the direct relationship between you and your kids. So if you're holding space for them, you can get curious with them about stuff. You also, I think this what can be hard too, take opportunities to get interested in what they're doing. I mean, it's hard now because a lot of that's on their phone, and there's a whole thing around phones and privacy and screens, but like, have their friends over, be a place where kids
especially as an expat, it's such an amazing way into getting to know a culture is through your kids. So it's because I learn things, and they don't necessarily tell me directly, but I just get from how they talk to their friends, or the just little things I pick up has taught me so much about how this country works that I would have never known before or seen before. And so it's like, it's an amazing way in, even if they they're trying to keep you out and away from their business. But
and car rides are awesome. Like, when you're not looking at them in that cooking, parallel activities, I say,
Mhm.
parallel activities. You're shopping and walking, you're cooking and you're next to each other, you're riding next to each other. Like anytime you're not face to face across the table, like, what did you guys do Friday?
Mhm.
But instead having conversations about, what's happening around, what do they notice in
Mhm.
the culture, and what are they into, right? Like and even in the preteen, like, and they want to show you
Mm.
something. Like the number of times my kid wants to show me something and I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
I
Mhm.
am so utterly disinterested in that thing. but
Mhm.
but
But and then, when they're 16, 17, and you're desperate for those moments, you'll look at anything they show you. You'll be like,
yes.
"My kid wants to interact with me. I am so there." Yes. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy to kind of look back on. Yeah, so I think pretty much everything you just said is just not even just global teens. That's all
Yeah.
teens everywhere. And I guess there are things that a lot more proactive things you can do when they're younger and you're moving and you with different cultures and the books and everything, because you can give your teen books to read about the country and they'll just look at you like you've lost your mind. And
Yeah.
but so there is hope, because I kind of feel like when they're little and you talk about you go to the international school fairs and you wear your dirndl and you
Yeah.
bring the pretzels or whatever, and your children love it and it's like, yay. And then they
Yeah.
fast forward a few years and they'll be like, oh, just stay away. But I mean, you're giving me hope in that they'll at some point they'll remember that
They
and
do.
they'll
It's
be
just a rough
happy.
decade.
Mhm.
But like
Oh.
I
Mhm.
honestly, like, you have to have the parenting piece that I say is that you have to trust that there is a biologically driven separation process that is happening. And if you've done the front loading,
Yeah.
then part of what
Mm,
they're doing is really pushing, and you have to be secure
mm,
enough in your attachment to them to sustain it and to hold your space
mhm.
and to try not to feel rejected.
I'm struggling with this, but I recognize the need that for myself, my husband too. We have to build our own network, because we don't
Yeah.
have the friends and family from back home, but we can't rely on our children to be that.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy.
Another thing that comes up for me with the global teen stuff, it was interesting, I think, depending on
Mm.
where folks are and how much activity is available. And now COVID made it even more
Yeah.
complicated. But
Yes.
in terms of like, in where I was in West Africa, there wasn't as much freedom of movement, right? You were, as opposed, like, families and friends of mine from in the Netherlands would be like, oh my gosh, my kids just should be able to hop on their bikes and cruise
Hmm.
around for wherever. And it just, the infrastructure was different. It wasn't that it was dangerous. It was just the infrastructure was difficult to navigate with,
Mm.
traffic. And so there was a reality that parents who
Hmm.
didn't feel in control of their decisions or weren't sure it was the right thing, and then had surly teens in their home, were believing on some
Hmm.
level that their kids would be happier somewhere else.
Hmm.
They're unhappy
Yes.
here. That's my fault. No wonder when I was their age, I was in my small town and I had more movement. What have I done?
Hmm.
And then they just say yes to everything.
Hmm.
They just say, out of like guilt,
Mm.
they will buy certain things. They will
Hmm.
allow kids to do things that if they were home they would never allow
Yeah.
their child to do. And part of that's
Oh,
cultural flexibility.
yes,
It is.
it is.
You want your kid to kind of be not be a really
Mm.
dramatic outlier compared to the norms that have been established in the expat community that you're entering. But in reality, I think when you're making a parenting decision driven by fear or
Mhm.
driven by guilt, and in most cases it's both, driven by the fear your child will be angry and rejecting of you, and guilt that maybe you've put them in a situation that is contributing to their unhappiness, then those decisions aren't serving you or your child in the long run.
No, but
So
it's hard, and I mean, so many times, not just even from our perspective, saying yes to things or letting them get away with things, but it's also, they spend time with the grandparents and they get spoiled like you wouldn't believe, and they get given all these things, and you're kind of like, whoa, let's just, be, um, and you can understand it. People don't see each other, and this is a global kids and grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, and you just want to go completely over the top when you do see them. And so sometimes it just sends all these mixed messages, and
that's distinct to global stuff too, in a lot of ways. And I think also too, if your extended family holds any judgment of your decision to raise your kids internationally,
that's a whole other,
then that complicates, like, if your child is unhappy and tells their grandparents they hate it here, and now you're having a multi-generational argument about whether you did the right thing, right? But this whole concept that there's a right thing, and that if you did, it's subconscious, but there's this thing where we think, if I had made the right decision, my child would be happy all the time. They are not happy all the time. Therefore, I made the wrong decision. We're stuck here. I better make the best of it by saying yes to everything I think might make them happy. Right?
Completely. And you get yourself into that mindset. And so something that also plays into that and letting them get away with is, you mentioned it briefly earlier, is teens and screens, because that's a big one especially with the international community. When you have taken your child out of their social circle, you've moved halfway around the world, the only way they can connect with their friends and family is through screens, which I do myself. But then it comes to teens, and then they have the usual screen time with the local people, because they have to make new connections, new friends, and everything happens online. Everything happens via screens, and especially now, especially in the corona, this corona year is just our screen time on the whole is just, it's exacerbating. Exactly. But then also, of course, they need to be able to maintain connections, and it's so important, and to be able to maintain friendships. And the only way is through screens. And I've gone downstairs at 2 a.m. Because I heard voices, and they're on the phone to the UK, and it's like, but my friend needs me, she's having a crisis, and I'm like, but it's 2 a.m. And so at what point, so that's
and I think the moderation too, what we do know that a lot of screen time contributes. So here's the catch-22, contributes to anxiety and depression. Well, I should say there's very clear correlational data, right? Nobody can say the exact cause, but we have very clear correlational data that starting in around 2008 or 9, when handheld devices became more of a thing, rates of anxiety and depression skyrocketed. We know that for teens, we know that for girls, people who identify as girls, the research is limited because it is fairly, girls, boys, there's not a lot of gender identity consideration given. But for those who identify as girls, the social comparison that happens, and the social exclusion that happens, and the dynamics that happen around comparing themselves and things online are a major source of anxiety and stress and depression. Boys tend to have more challenges, at least in the data, with gaming habits. That they're lost in a world of gaming habits that are really obsessive, and they end up avoiding things and those are two different kinds of risks that come along with screen time. The trick for parents, I think, is it's a whole other topic, but is critical thinking around social media. Start early with that, with girls and boys, because boys are seeing the same media. They're getting the same messages as girls are about how girls and boys are supposed to be in adolescence and in the world. So it's critical thinking. It's looking at videos of the doctoring of images that happen. Nobody's body. I used to think they cleaned up pimples and bags under your eyes. They're stretching necks out by 3 inches and carving inches off weight. I mean, no. So critical thinking around media is huge. Charging them in a centralized place, if not in parents' bedrooms that are off limits overnight. And also, it kind of meets both things that we were talking about before. My cousin, and she has even a big sign over the fireplace that says "forced family fun." The idea is they squat. The parents squat on time, where they're like, "Nope, yes, we honor your friendships. Yes, we make you available to your friends. Yes, we want you to have them. Yes, we know you're in this group, in this club, and." Even if it's Thursday night for 2 hours, people's screens are away, and we're playing a board game. We're planning a trip on paper because we're thinking about what we want to do. We are, cooking a recipe, like some kind of thing. And doesn't matter if they drag their feet through it. What I find in time now, having worked with many teens who've aged through their parents trying to figuring it out, two things that teens come away with after their teen years. And it means pushing back. Teens push to be alone, leave me out. I don't want to go. I'm not going with you. I won't go. No. If parents give up and stop inviting or stop insisting on at least part of that time together, then kids later are left with a sense that parents didn't care. So holding some kind of line about like, yeah, sorry, I know you hate us, but we still do what we do as a family. You can hate us in the backseat. All right, like I don't know what to tell you. And the same goes with some kind of limit. So the having worked with teens who are older, teens who had and who have aged through, teens who had whose parents handled their guilt or just had really permissive approaches, to teens later were like, what the heck were my parents thinking? Like, why did they let me do that? Why did they listen to me? Like, how did I never should have been in some of the situations I was in. And so a big piece that it comes down to is I'm thinking about as the parent of a teen, is like being able to handle your own anxiety about your kid being mad at you, right? Like, or being sad. So like, how can you say, yes, we will be together? Again, not for 3 weeks out of every month, because they do need to be doing their own thing, but to hold space for family to be together, hold space that doesn't include screens for family. And that's hard for adults now too.
Very much.
But to hold space for that, just rituals. We need rituals to create safety, to create comfort, to create knowing, to create stories, that's what creates identity, is belonging. It's food rituals, it's traditions around holidays. That's what creates family culture.
Yes, absolutely. And this is to maybe give those listeners some positives, the listeners who we've put off having kids and who we've put off moving at all costs. It's especially those rituals and those things that you discover in a different culture together, and then you celebrate, and then you take those, or even then you move again, and then maybe you take some of the shared ritual and you drag it out. Yeah, the teenagers might be like, oh, I don't want to eat that or whatever, but it's you do it and you create this thing. It's my hope that at some point they'll go back to that and they'll be
very much. I mean, that's the stuff that sticks with folks is traditions, is rituals, is growth areas and stretches. And I don't mean to like, yeah, I'm glad we're talking about it, because it's not, I think adolescence it's really a fascinating time to be a parent. It really, like, you can have such cool connections and awarenesses, and your kids are going to light fires about stuff that you didn't know anything about, and like bring things to the table literally and figuratively, introduce people into your lives. I think it's recognizing that the brain, like even in early adolescence, from 11 to 14, the brain grows as much as it did from 0 to 3. So there's a biological press for bridges to connect in the brain, risk-taking to happen, identity to establish, and that it's all healthy, natural, normal. You are along for the ride, and have to be able to not take it personally when your kids are pushing away or resisting. That how can you stay warm, flexible, firm, right? Food, warm, flexible, firm, and do a gut check to see if you're making decisions for them around fear. That trials, hardship, confusion are a part of all families. Again, rationally, we know that,
it's hard,
but we still believe we're going to keep it from our kids somehow, that we actually are going to be able to prevent upset for them. You can't, no matter where they are.
But talking about rituals, do you have one? Do you have something that you do? Because I mean, you're back in the US now, even if you're in Hawaii. Is there something that you do when you want to establish that sense of connectedness to another place? And is there is there anything food related or a tradition that you have?
I do a combination of, I think for me, food is part of it, although I'm a bad cook in any cultural setting, so it's sort of dicey when I try food of any kind. But I actually have the mom and the family that I lived with in South Africa was an amazing. She's of Malaysian Muslim descent, and did amazing curries and foods. And she makes a chicken biryani that
I love
is,
curries.
and a rooibos tea. So like there's a tea, and there's such rituals around tea in South Africa, and that so I do a little a tea ritual and some curries, and I just feel, I don't know, I feel lucky, right? Like I feel and it's funny though, when I first came home from South Africa, I was so proud, and I I cooked my family biryani. My dad for years was like, heartburn the day, like he was just like that was okay, Laura, whatever. It was sort of a great example where they were like humored me, and then we're like, but that doesn't sit. I could never do it. It was kind of a funny thing. And my graduate school friends were like, okay, we love the biryani. Like I've introduced it to people over time, and probably not done biryani a fair shake, but it was well intended, and it comforts, like it does. It reminds me of this learning time in my life, takes me back to other smells and sounds. I have music that I like to listen to, and I do still use, I reach out, I send people, love and gratitude, and laugh about a memory or a shared thing. And so I think for me, it's a combination of foods and music, and then just a FaceTime note, message, anything, just sort of keeping that connectedness, because when I'm missing that connectedness, I like to kind of build a bridge that way.
Yeah, and it's really nice also for your children to see that, to see you make that effort and maintain connections. I'd like to talk a little bit about one of your other areas of expertise, because we haven't got to that yet. Parenting gender expansive kids and adolescents, and above all, what happens when you move with a child who is still very much on that journey to find their identity. Of course, this is a very demanding parenting situation in any case for any parent, but for global families, I think there are a lot of added things to consider.
Yeah. I think one of the things I would say in my personal experience and my professional experience, if you're making these moves with a child who has intersecting identities, right? So if you're making these moves with a child who already is going to have a journey around who am I and where do I fit within their family, or like they're an adoptive family, right? So they're already going to have an identity journey that
additional
is complex
layers
and has layers. Or there's a gender piece. It's a minority identity. It's going to call more attention to them. It is going to highlight structures in place. It is going to stretch cross-cultural understanding. There have been, so if you're speaking about gender identity, so kids who are non-binary or transgender, non-binary meaning they say they don't feel like they're a boy or a girl, they feel like either both or neither. So we understanding gender falls more on this spectrum now than the old two boxes that we used to think. Or they're identifying as gay or lesbian, like somehow they're not heterosexual and lining up completely with the parts they have and how they feel on the inside. There are specialized needs for support for kids in community.
Absolutely, because you yourself don't know. Maybe you have an idea of whether it's a more liberal or a more conservative society that you're entering, but you essentially don't know. Moving, and then you don't have a network. You have to build your network, and where do you start? And you're surrounded by people who don't know you, and they don't know your child. And I find, that's in general for anyone moving, to be introduce yourself and have to start from scratch in terms of and how people perceive you. They haven't seen you, and they haven't seen your child when they were babies or toddlers, or just they haven't been part of that journey. And so
Yeah.
you have to present yourself and your kids and say, this is who we are. And then people take you at that, at whatever level you are right then. And if you have a teenager and they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't have, I call it like credibility points. When you're in a community and your family's contributing and your kid has been, this way and cute and contributing in this, like you build these credibility points. You're banking contributions to the community. And so then when you do something later, when your child's identity means that there are some unexpected requests or asks or hardships or requests that people around them change in some way or do something out of the norm, you have you've been banking, all these other ways you've built and contributed to the community. And if you're starting from scratch, it can be especially vulnerable, I want to say, for both parents and young people. If you and the turnover. So what's distinct, like in some ways, if you have a child who has, like I was saying in the beginning, my family is complicated from a cultural standpoint, and trying to meet all the needs and how that works. In some ways is perfect for the expat community, because there's so many ways families came together, and cross-cultural marriages and children
and you would expect
movement,
people are very accepting
ideal.
and very open-minded. So you kind of think, oh, that would be ideal, because then so you say my child is just non-binary, and then just has, and maybe from one day to the next has kind of said, this is, I want to be addressed as so and so now. And then you think, actually moving somewhere new, perfect. No one needs to, be part of that whole journey. But then there's a huge chunk missing.
And the turnover. So you don't have the history and the credibility. And now you've got new teachers in international schools change with regularity, especially in certain parts of the world. Neighbors move in. So you go through the whole, what I call the discovery period. The discovery that, oh, that's your mom if you're a transracially adopted kid, or the discovery of like, are you a boy or a girl, over and over and over again for kids who aren't read in the way that they wish their gender was read, or if you're deciding whether to be out as transgender or out as gay or lesbian in the school community, and you have new influence, everybody's like, what's their deal? Oh, are they out? It's like this ripping off of the privacy scab over and over again.
So
it's a nod as we sort of think about, and I would be happy at another point to come back and speak about either of those, but I think there's a special nod recognizing the vulnerability that parents who are trying to take care of their kids, that in a global context have added layers of worry and need for support if their children are navigating layered or minority identities, because the world will remind you of that with regularity when you're actually living in it. And so it's a nod to the parents listening to this to just check in with your friends. How are they doing? What do they need? How can your kid, if you're not parenting the child on the gender or adoptive journey, for instance, how can your kid be the upstander or the includer or the, oh, I'm getting tearful just thinking about it.
There are so many layers to this. And again, you have to, as a parent, to make sure that you have that person, and even if you just don't have them locally, but you have them on the phone and you can just vent and go through the whole thing. And it's so essential that we have those people in our lives. There's a tendency, and this is also an expat thing, I think, that we seem to handle everything and have this amazing experience, and everyone's like, wow, that's amazing. And I've heard that so many times where people said, I don't know how you do it, and it's amazing. And where I haven't said I am at breaking point, and I'm only fairly recently have started doing that and just saying, look, I really need to tell people, because they don't necessarily know. And I can't expect them to be my support network if I don't tell them that I need them to be.
Right. And this is a great, like, as we're thinking about sort of, with the parenting teens thing and how to know. So when they say, leave me alone, except when I need you, like, practice being able to ask your kids, like, hey, kiddo, what do you need? Like, literally, don't tell them what they need. Don't tell them what you want them to know. Don't, like, what do you need? And the same is true for us. We're like mirroring that by saying to our friends, you know, hey, I need a little X, like, can I have an ear for a bit? Or I'm at a breaking point and I need some perspective. And I also think that one of the beauties of the potential beauties of raising a kid who has intersecting identities. Again, I don't want to paint that as like an inevitably treacherous journey. It's a layered one, but they're also fabulous vetting systems, because quite frankly, you learn very quickly who is having parented a kid who is doing expansive things. Like, I literally was like, okay, world, you're going to sort the people in front of me pretty quickly. Like,
absolutely. What a great point.
With a big smile and a high five, and, you know, comments on the, and so there was there can be these really beautiful, rich, instant connections, because you find out somebody's niece just came out as non-binary or trans, and they're eager for, look, I mean, I'm getting emotional, and they're eager for that people who know and people who want to love you in your journey and want to support your journey.
Absolutely. And, you know, and sometimes it's exactly that. And that brings us back full circle to the beginning. We talked about the expat bubbles, where people are so stuck in their position, in their rigidity of the structures and everything. And sometimes having a new person, a new family come in and shake things up by, you know, asking the questions, and maybe like, no, I'm different. I don't know how to fit into this. Can be, I mean, of course, and we've covered this, incredibly hard for the family, for the child, but it can be such a nice way for the people who are already there to reassess their own views and perspectives. I've always said to my children, don't hide who you are, because they might look at you like, you know, who are you? And this is, you know, children with different accents, children with a different skin color, whatever, but it's something that will shake the existing structures. And so it can be an amazingly beautiful mutual thing.
Right. No, there's a catalyst. There's a catalyst energy that's a lot for kids to handle, but for families, again, like, it's complicated. We don't want to minimize it, and there's beauty in it too. And so I think being able to recognize, and yes, the expat community is a rich one to really be inviting people to be reflective about their assumptions, and inviting people to really take a look at, you know, what assumptions they've made, what systems they're enforcing, what room can they make for this new way of being, and how can they hold each other, you know, kind of accountable, and imagine the lens of another human. I mean, that's part of what a lot of this does, is
exactly. It's an amazing experience, and I wish more people could experience it. Yeah. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have to stop.
Yes, I know. I'm sitting on it. I'm biting my tongue. Yeah, I'm biting my tongue. Thank you for having me on to talk about it.
So where can people find you if they are inspired and they would like to get in touch with you?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. My website is drlauraanderson.com, or I also have a business Facebook page that I've, you know, recently started. I was late to that, but it's going and it's building, and I do live talks every Friday that it's all just sort of content that I'm sharing that's always around parenting. And that's Common Chord Psychology Services. So you can find me on Facebook and stay tuned there for stuff that I'm rolling out. You can also email me at contact@drlauraanderson.com. So website, emails, or come hang out and do some live chatting with me. And I do current events, parenting talks, and I do, you know, typically around gender, around race, around anxiety, expats. There's a flow of topics, but it's always parenting focused. So I would welcome some energy in there.
Excellent.
Great. Sure.
Thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure. Take care.
You too. Woo! That was quite a conversation. As you could see, we found it really difficult to stop, as there are just so many topics to cover when it comes to expat family living, and especially when it comes to parenting global children. I took away a lot of positive energy from this, which is something that we all need, especially at the moment, and I know that my fellow parents of teenagers will appreciate this more than anybody else. If you've been inspired or maybe felt like punching the air in agreement during our chat, and if you think that Dr. Anderson might be the perfect person to talk to, then get in touch with her. I've provided all the links in the show notes. What I'm going to do now is make a list of things for forced family fun. I can't wait to see my teens' faces, and in fact I can already see their expressions of horror. But I won't let that get me down. I'll just cling to the feeling that I'm doing this for their future sense of belonging and happiness. And that's it from me for today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time.